Hello and welcome to the Escape English. Have you ever felt completely empty, like your whole world just vanished into thin air? Have you ever walked into a room so cold that it froze your heart? Today's story is about losing everything you love, but fighting to find warmth in the darkest places. Listening to this emotional journey will help you improve your English naturally and deeply. By hearing real human feelings, you will learn new words and understand how to express your own emotions in English. You do not need to memorize grammar rules today. Just relax, open your heart, listen closely, and let the story paint a picture in your mind. Let us step away from the noise of the world and begin our story. My name is Mia. I am 23 years old, and I am a cook. My life used to be loud, warm, and beautiful. My family owned a small, cozy restaurant in the heart of the city. For as long as I can remember, my clothes always smelled like roasted garlic, fresh basil, and sweet tomatoes. The kitchen was my safe place. It was where my parents taught me that food is not just for the stomach, but for the soul. But life can be very cruel. My parents passed away suddenly, leaving me alone with a mountain of debts. The bank took the restaurant. They took my home. Within a few months, I had lost the only life I ever knew. I felt like a ghost wandering through the city. I was entirely broke, and I was terrified. I needed a job immediately, or I was going to be sleeping on the cold streets. That deep desperation pushed me to answer a strange advertisement I found online. The advertisement asked for a live-in private chef. It paid an unusually high amount of money, which I desperately needed to pay off my remaining debts. I took a deep breath, put on my best clothes, and rode the bus to the address. The bus dropped me off at the edge of the city. I walked up a long driveway and stopped in front of a massive, modern glass house. I stood outside, shivering in the wind. The house was stunning, but it did not look like a home. It looked like an empty, giant museum. The sharp angles and clear walls made it look fragile and lonely. I pressed the silver doorbell. A few moments later, a man opened the door. His name was James. James was a successful architect. I knew this because I had searched his name online, but the man standing in front of me did not look like a wealthy, powerful businessman. He looked completely exhausted. There were heavy, dark circles under his eyes. His shoulders slumped down, as if he was carrying a massive weight. He did not smile when he greeted me. He simply stared at me with empty, tired eyes. He invited me inside. As soon as I stepped through the front door, a heavy sadness washed over me. The air inside the house was freezing. There were no pictures on the walls. There were no shoes by the door. There was no smell of coffee or fresh laundry. There was just cold, hard glass, gray furniture, and total silence. It felt like time had stopped in this house. James led me down a long, quiet hallway. He told me that his wife had died very recently. Since her death, the house had turned into a tomb. He did not ask about my cooking experience. We entered the kitchen. It was a beautiful, expensive kitchen, but it looked like nobody had ever used it. The stove was perfectly clean. The metal counters were shining and cold. Then I saw the children. Oliver and Ruby were sitting at the end of a long dining table. They were so small, and they looked incredibly fragile. They were completely silent. I walked closer and tried to say a gentle hello, but they did not look up at me. They just stared blankly at their plates. I looked down at the table. On their expensive ceramic plates, there was only a single piece of plain white bread. Next to the plates were 2 glasses of plain milk. James stood behind me and sighed heavily. He told me they refused to eat anything else. He reached into his pocket, handed me a thick envelope of cash in advance, and quietly walked away, disappearing into the dark shadows of the house. I stood all alone in that huge, freezing kitchen with two silent children. The silence was deafening. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake coming here. I felt a knot in my stomach. But then, the little boy, Oliver, slowly lifted his head. He looked right into my eyes. His pale lips parted, and what he whispered to me made my blood run completely cold. Oliver looked up at me. His voice was barely a whisper. "If we eat good things, we will forget her." I stopped breathing for a second. My hands felt completely cold. I understood now. They were not just stubborn. They were terrified. They believed. That feeling good meant betraying their dead mother. They were holding on to their grief to hold on to her. I did not argue. I did not tell them they were wrong. I did not force them to eat. I just nodded slowly. I took the plain bread and milk away. I left them alone in their quiet world. But I knew I had to do something. I could not use words to reach them. I had to use the only magic I knew. I had to use food. I started to work. The kitchen was too quiet. I moved carefully. I found flour, butter, and yeast in the large pantry. I began to make sweetbread. I measured the sugar in silence. I cracked the eggs. I kneaded the soft dough with my hands. I did not speak to Oliver and Ruby. I let the heavy silence stay in the room. But I tried to make the silence feel softer. Soon, the oven grew hot. The comforting smell of sweet yeast and melting butter began to float in the air. It traveled out of the kitchen. It crept down the cold glass hallways. It smelled like safety. It smelled like home. The next morning, I woke up early. I decided to make pancakes. I did not make normal round pancakes. I carefully poured the thick batter into the pan. I shaped them into little bears and rabbits. I placed them gently on the plates. I added a small piece of butter. I poured warm, golden syrup over them. The sweet, rich smell of vanilla filled the cold room. Oliver and Ruby walked in slowly. They stood by the kitchen door. They looked at the animal shapes on the plates. They did not sit down. I did not look at them. I kept my back turned toward them. I stood at the sink and washed some bowls. I kept my movements small and quiet. Then I heard a small sound. A heavy wooden chair moved against the floor. Then another chair moved. I heard the soft clinking of small forks touching the ceramic plates. I smiled to myself, but I did not turn around. I let them eat in peace. When I finally turned back to the table, both plates were empty. Days passed exactly like this. We lived in a quiet routine. We did not use many words. I roasted a large chicken with fresh rosemary, garlic, and bright lemons. The warm, savory smell reached every empty corner of the lonely house. I baked chocolate cookies. I made rich, hot soup. One afternoon, I was making dough. Ruby stood close to the counter. She pointed a small finger at the white flour. She wanted to touch it. I did not say anything. I simply gave her a small bowl. I gave Oliver a wooden spoon. They reached their hands into the flour. They mixed the water and the flour. They made a terrible mess on the clean metal counter. For the first time in a very long time, I heard a sound. It was small and fragile. It was a laugh. Ruby was laughing at the sticky dough on her fingers. Oliver looked at her, and a real smile appeared on his face. Then, a tall shadow appeared in the kitchen doorway. It was James. He wore his usual wrinkled clothes, but he was not looking at the floor. He was looking at his children. He watched them smile. He walked slowly into the kitchen. He did not go to his Dark office. He sat down at the wooden table with us. I handed him a piece of warm, fresh bread. He took it. He ate it in silence. We all sat together in the warm light of the kitchen. It was quiet. It was incredibly peaceful. But the delicate peace did not last. The heavy front door opened with a loud crash. Sharp, high heels clicked aggressively against the glass floor of the hallway. The freezing air from outside rushed back into the warm house. A woman walked straight into the kitchen. She wore a sharp, expensive black coat. Her dark hair was perfect. Her face was beautiful, but it was hard and cold like winter ice. This was Vanessa. She was James's sister-in-law. She stopped in the middle of the room. She looked at the spilled flour on the counter. She looked at the children laughing. She looked at James eating bread. Finally, she slowly turned her head and looked directly at me. Her dark eyes were filled with pure hate. The warmth in the kitchen vanished instantly. The children immediately stopped smiling and looked down at the floor. James stood up quickly, his tired face turning pale. Vanessa walked slowly toward me. She did not yell. She did not raise her voice at all. She stepped into my personal space. She leaned in very close to my ear, and she whispered something that made my heart stop. "You think you can replace my sister with a little bit of sugar?" Vanessa whispered. Her voice was like poison. I stepped back quickly. My heart pounded hard against my chest. I could not find any words to say. "Vanessa, stop," James said. His voice was shaky and surprised. He stepped quickly between us. "The children are right here. Do not do this now." "Look at this horrible mess," Vanessa shouted. She pointed her sharp red fingernail at the white flour on the counter. My sister hated messes. She kept this beautiful house completely perfect, and you let this cheap servant ruin it. "She is not a servant. Her name is Mia," James said, but he looked incredibly tired. He looked too weak to fight against her sudden anger. "Oliver, Ruby, go to your rooms right now," Vanessa commanded strictly. The children froze in fear. They dropped their small wooden spoons. They did not look at me. They turned and ran out of the kitchen immediately. James followed them quickly. "Kids, wait," he called out. He left the kitchen to comfort his terrified children. Suddenly, I was completely alone with Vanessa. The air in the large kitchen felt thick and heavy. I could barely breathe. Vanessa walked closer to me again. Her tall shadow fell over me. "I know exactly what you are doing," she said. She stared deeply into my eyes. "I am only cooking," I said. My voice trembled with fear. "They were starving, Vanessa. They needed to eat." "Do not lie to me," Vanessa snapped sharply. "You are just a cheap gold digger. I see exactly how you look at him. You are using food to manipulate a rich, grieving man." "That is not true," I cried out. "I just want to help the children feel safe." "You are not helping them. You are erasing my dead sister's memory," Vanessa hissed. "Every time you bake your stupid bread, you make those children forget her. You are destroying this family. You are a terrible, selfish person." Her cruel words hit me like a physical punch to the stomach. I felt completely sick. Was she right? Was I making the children forget their mother? I thought I was bringing warmth to this house, but maybe I was just erasing a ghost. A dark, heavy guilt washed over me like freezing water. I was ruining everything. "Get out of my sister's house," Vanessa said coldly, "or I will make your life a living hell." She turned around sharply. She walked out of the room. Her expensive high heels clicked loudly against the glass floor until the sound completely disappeared into the quiet house. I stood completely alone in the kitchen. I looked down at the spilled white flour. I looked at the two empty little chairs. Hot tears burned my eyes. I was just a poor cook, not a mother. I had no right to be here. I ran down the hallway to my small bedroom. My hands shook violently. I pulled my old suitcase from under the bed. I threw my simple clothes inside. I did not fold anything. Carefully, I just needed to escape. I grabbed my winter coat. I zipped up the heavy bag. I waited for the house to go completely dark. I waited until the middle of the night. The large house was silent again. The terrifying, cold feeling had fully returned. I carried my heavy suitcase quietly down the long glass hallway. I did not turn on any lights. I finally reached the large front door. I put my shaking hand on the cold silver handle. "Where are you going?" a deep, sudden voice asked in the dark. I gasped in shock. I dropped my heavy bag. It hit the wooden floor with a loud thud. James stepped slowly out of the dark shadows. He looked down at my suitcase. He looked up at my wet, tearful face. "I have to leave, James," I said quickly. "Please, just let me go." "Why? Because of what Vanessa said?" he asked. He stepped closer to me. "She is right," I cried softly. "I am just a cook. I am making your children forget their real mother. I am destroying your family's precious memories. I am so deeply sorry." "No, you are completely wrong. Stop," James said firmly. "I am a stranger. I do not belong in your perfect house," I yelled back in a panicked whisper. "This house was never perfect, Mia," James said. His voice cracked with emotion. He looked directly into my crying eyes. "Vanessa does not know the truth. Nobody outside this house knows the truth." "What truth?" I asked. My heart raced wildly in my chest. "My marriage," James whispered softly. He looked down at the floor, then back up at me. My marriage was completely broken and fake. Stared at him in pure shock. "What do you mean?" "My wife did not want this family life," James said bitterly. "She hated the loud noise of children. She hated messy rooms. She hated eating together. We never ate dinner as a family. Not even once." "Never?" I asked in disbelief. "Never," he repeated clearly. He took another step toward me. "This house was freezing cold long before she died. We lived like silent ghosts, Mia. We slept in separate rooms. We were completely empty and miserable." He reached out his hands. He gently grabbed my shaking shoulders. His hands felt incredibly warm. "You are not erasing good memories, Mia," James said. His tired eyes suddenly filled with bright tears. "You are giving us our very first memories. For the first time in my entire life, my house actually feels like a home. Please, do not walk out that door." I stood totally frozen. I looked at the man holding me. The heavy front door was right behind my back. The cold, lonely night was waiting outside. But inside, holding my shoulders, was a broken man begging me to stay. I stayed. As I stood in the dark hallway, I looked down at James's warm hands, gently holding my shaking shoulders. I closed my eyes and let my chaotic thoughts finally settle. I realized I was not ruining a family. I was helping to build one from the shattered, broken pieces. I was no longer just a poor, grieving cook. I belonged here. The very next morning, James faced Vanessa in the bright kitchen. He was no longer the tired, defeated man I first met. His voice was calm, but incredibly firm. He told her she was never allowed to disrespect the woman who brought life back into his home. He told her to leave. When the heavy front door closed behind her, a massive weight permanently lifted off my heart. James turned back to me, his eyes full of warmth, and confessed that I had not just fed his children, I had completely healed his soul. He told me he was falling deeply in love with me. 6 months have passed since that dark, terrifying night. I often sit alone in the master bedroom, looking out the large glass window, and quietly marvel at how life changes. My small, lonely chef's room downstairs is completely empty now. Massive house is no longer a freezing, silent museum. It is constantly filled with golden light, the beautiful sound of children laughing loudly, and the sweet, comforting smell of baking bread. I lost my family's restaurant, but in my deepest, darkest despair, I finally found the happy, loving family I always dreamed of. Now it is time for vocabulary learning. Understanding the difficult English words we used in today's story will help you express your own deep emotions more clearly. Let us review them together. Desperation means a strong feeling of sadness and loss of hope, usually when you need something very badly. In the story, Mia felt deep desperation when she lost her restaurant and needed a job immediately to survive. Wandering means walking around slowly without any clear direction or purpose. Mia felt like a ghost wandering through the city because she had lost her home and did not know where to go next. Fragile means something is very delicate and can be broken very easily. A glass cup is fragile. In our story, the lonely children looked very fragile because they were deeply sad, quiet, and physically weak. Deafening means a sound is extremely loud. But in English, we also say deafening silence. This means the silence in the room is so heavy, thick, and uncomfortable that it feels as loud as a scream. Betray means to hurt someone who trusts you or to break a promise. The children thought that eating delicious food and feeling happy would betray their dead mother's memory. Manipulate means to carefully control someone or a situation, usually in a tricky, hidden, or dishonest way. Vanessa falsely accused Mia of using sweet food to manipulate the grieving widower for his money. Erasing means completely removing something so it cannot be seen or remembered anymore. Vanessa angrily thought, Mia was erasing the memory of her sister from the children's minds. Despair means the complete loss of all hope in a very dark situation. At the end of the story, Mia reflects and realizes that her deepest despair actually led her to find true happiness and a new family. Now it is time for shadowing practice. Shadowing helps you sound natural, emotional, and confident when you speak English. Listen to my voice, feel the strong emotion in the words, and repeat exactly after me. Speak out loud. I was not a stranger. He begged me to stay. I healed his broken heart. The cold house is finally warm. I found my true family. We are finally happy. Practice these short sentences every single day. Remember to focus on the feeling behind the words, not just the sound. Thank you so much for listening to the Escape English today. I hope this emotional journey touched your heart and helped you learn new, meaningful words. I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever felt completely lost before finding happiness? And what is your favorite comfort food when you are sad? Thank you for learning with me. See you next time.